So welcome to Strategy, Finance and Risk Committee meeting of Tuesday 6th of June 2023. Everyone be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Just a reminder to use your microphone when you're speaking. Turn off or onto silent mobile phones, please, and a reminder that there'll be an extraordinary council meeting at the conclusion of this committee with one item on the agenda, which is dog registration fees for 2023-24. So, who do I call upon for the opening karakia? Who's got the seniority here? Te Bill, please.
Kia ora no tātou, kia koe hoki nei, e te tūru matua nei o tēnei komiti na mihi hoki nei kia koe hoki e Anne, o tira ki hoki nei tūkana ki Homaitia o tēnei honere kia hau, no reira, o tira i ngā ringa raupā kai Wainganui kia tātou nei, tēnei hoki rata mihi nei kia tātou katoa, no reira, kai noi. He honore, he korori e te maunga rongo, he whakaaro pai ki a tangata katoa āmine. No reire te atua tēnei hoki rā ki a tātou nei i tēnei ai, ka tukuna nei ki tēnei ino atu nei i au koe. Nā hoki nei hei arahi rā i nā kaupapa kōrero e pāna hoki nei i nā take, a whakahira i tā tātou nei tāone nui o hoki o tauranga. No reire te atua mana ki hea rā i nā whānau pani kia Wainganui ki a tātou nei te moana, o tira i nā marae maha, nā kāinga maha o tēnei o te motu. Ko tēnei kia mātuna inoi atu ki a koe, kararo ki te ingoa o tō tamaitia i Ukraiti mona wa ake tonu atu, āmene, kia ora tātai.
Thank you very much. So we have no apologies, but Rohario is leaving us at 3:30. Is that right? Oh no, Materi, sorry. Everyone else here, Bruce and Stephen online. Welcome. I don't think we need a mover in a second if someone leaving early. No. We have no one booked in the public forum. We have I have a late update. So we have an update that's been tabled for item 9.3, our financial and non-financial report. I'm not sure, I haven't been made aware of any business to be transferred from public excluded to open. Nothing. And I'm not aware of any change to the order of business. That brings us to the confirmation of minutes from 27th of March 2023. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Bill's moving, it's a true and correct record, and Wayne is seconding. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against carried. Any declarations of conflicts of interest? Rohario.
Kia ora Anne, ko te mea tuatahi me mihi ka tika ki a koe, e te pio me tō karakia I whakawāte ai I tō tātai nei hui, tēnā koe e te rangatira, tira o tira kia tātou katoa. Just declaring conflicts of interest on any matters relating to resource management reforms and also Three Waters. Kia ora.
Thank you. And shared.
Kia ora. Along with Rohario, declare some conflicts in my role, Ministry for the Environment, and RM reform, and also touches into Three Waters.
Thank you. Right, that brings us to the audit plan for 2023, and we have Leon and Anton with us. Is that right? Welcome. Do you want to come up to the table? Thank you. Aha.
Marion Gabrick. Here I'd just like to welcome Leon and Anton to run through the audit plan for the year, for the financial report and the interim audit that they've just completed.
Kia ora, mara. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Leon Peters. First time I appear in front of you. So probably you won't pick it up from my accent. I'm not born in New Zealand, but been here about exactly 15 years. Been with Audit New Zealand that long as well. Got quite a bit of experience in the local government sector, including Hamilton City, Auckland Council, Auckland Transport, Crown Infrastructure Partners. Oh, and there's quite a list. All the easy ones. I prefer interesting audits. So, as far as our audit plan is concerned, we actually presented two letters that should be in your pack. The one is the audit engagement letter, which is a very standard letter, just setting out our mutual responsibilities. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, and rather take questions on that as required. As far as the audit plan is concerned, this is a more significant letter because that sets out what we are going to focus on during the audit. And what I want to draw your attention to are the significant audit risks that we've identified, which is the revaluations of infrastructure assets. And the other one is the risk of management override, which is a standard audit risk and a standard significant risk for all audits. Other areas of focus will be the fair value assessments of the assets, the infrastructure assets not being revalued this year. The investment property valuations, because of the economic climate we're in and the fluctuations in the movement in the value of these things. Major capital projects, including progress you're making against them, but also the accounting treatments, Three Waters reforms that was just mentioned, funding mechanisms for infrastructure projects. Those are quite interesting, I must say. I read them and I thought, no, okay, I'll have to work on it to understand what's going on here. Then, of course, the new council head office building, some new standards. Then there's the proposed timetable, which is very similar to last year. What we need to do this year is to complete our audit to allow you to adopt the annual report before the 31st of October, which is now the statutory deadline after those 2 years of extensions. And we are here to achieve that this year. As far as group audits are concerned, the significant components for the Tauranga City Council group are Tauranga City Council itself, and then of course Bay Venues Limited. And also with Bay Venues Limited, the significant audit risk will be the revaluations of their assets. And that is about the letters that's already in your pack. Happy to take questions.
Any questions for Leon? Has Bruce got his hand up? Oh, sorry, my glasses on. It's a tiny hand. Bruce.
No worries, it's a tiny voice as well, and listeners. Deep South. Thanks, Leon. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Just a couple of questions. Probably one as much around to staff as it is to you, Leon. You noticed the important point about the accounting transactions, the deferred settlement, if I understand it correctly, around the head office building, the new library build, etc., or the new town centre build. And I'm just wanting a level of assurance that we have thought through and picked up on all the accounting transactions that need to be made in terms of this year. The other question I had was to you, Leon, on page 44 with timing. And I was interested in the second last line, which says that the draft report to the Commissioners issued on 19 October. What is the draft report? Is that your management report? Those are my two questions. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Bruce, yeah, there were two questions. Second one first, that report is the management report or report to governance that will issue in draft on that date. And first?
About the account treatment.
Oh, the accounting treatment. So we're meeting with the finance team regularly. Well, at least, I think it's once a month. At this stage, it'll increase in regularity as we get into the audit. But yes, we're working through all those, and we've got some technical opinions already on some of those buildings and the new CCOs that we're working through.
Thank you. That's fine for me, Ian. Thank you.
Okay, did you want an assurance from staff? I think
Oh,
we've got...
Garth, give it to me. That's superb. Thanks, Garth.
Yeah, we're working through audit on some of those issues. We've identified the sale of 90 Devonport Road to Willis Bond as a potential accounting issue, which audit are working through, and we've come up with what that should look like, and they're just going to confirm that it's got the correct treatment. That's pretty much the main one on that. And there's also the transfer of the Willow Street property to the Otamaha Trust, or the 50%. That's still to be resolved before year end.
That's the one I was going to ask about, whether that needed special treatment.
Yeah, we're working through that one still.
Okay.
But we want to get there before year end, so that we don't hold up the process with technical matters.
Yeah. Okay. Wayne.
Kia ora tātou, thank you, Chair. Look, it really just is a general question and for comfort. Having said that, I'm not sure. In the paper it says that there is key matters to be draw attention to, and you've listed them there by bullet point. But I thought in your intro you were saying maybe not, but it's to do with the revaluations. So they are going to be looked at this year, the revaluations.
Yeah, we've got the three valuations underway. They should be complete by end of June. So we've got parks infrastructure, airport infrastructure, and the three waters, which are being revalued again. So they will.
And investment properties?
Yeah, investment properties an annual
Right.
valuation that we do every year.
It really just out of comfort, because normally I would ask questions like that, because given the climate and the way properties are being valued in this current climate, whether or not there's going to be sort of a material adjustment. I don't know what the quantum is. I don't know what numbers we're talking here, because I just don't know. But it's a question I would pose, at the end of this revaluation exercise, is it going to be material that, in terms of our balance sheet, is it an early heads up saying it doesn't look pretty? Because I'm guessing it's all going to be sort of trending in downward pressure. So is there any sort of forward guessing at this stage what it might look like?
We've had a indicative for our land and buildings. We had a fair value assessment done by our valuers, in the market overall, the land market in Tauranga has come down by about a -7%. So that to me would say the investment property should be swinging. It won't be a huge rise. There's a downward trend in the land property values from the last 12 months. But we haven't finished that at all. That's a wee way off. So that's indicative.
Thank you.
Haven't we just had the Three Waters revalued recently?
Yes, we're having it done again. We had it at 2022, and we're having it done again this year. We had it done at 2021, and we had a fair value assessment, a formal one done at 2022, and then we're revaluing Three Waters again at 2023.
Because the government didn't believe the first lot? Is that just an accounting
It's an accounting
process?
requirement.
Okay.
And I also think, Madam Chair, if I may, it's also prudent, especially going into an LTP, to have those valuations done.
Right, okay. Okay, nothing else? So we want to receive the report for the audit plan for the 2023 annual report, fees and engagement letter. Someone like to move that? Bill? Wayne, thank you. Any further discussion? No? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. I
Thank you,
guess
ma'am.
we'll see you again.
Most definitely. We didn't bring our fee letter because it's still working its way through the Auditor General's
All
office.
right. Okay.
So we'll definitely come for that interesting discussion.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We'll look forward to it, I guess. Quarter 3 update of Lagoima. Oh, I've turned over too many pages. No? Oh, update of capital program. I think, yes, sorry, I'm not matching up. Okay, who's doing that?
Kia ora tātou. Just by way of introduction, this is a quarterly reporting out of cycle. So most, if not all, information represented here goes to the end of April. So that gives you the most recent update as far as the monthly reporting that we've got. And the slide deck that we're about to go through will be part of the minutes. And James will go through an overall picture of what the market looks like at the moment to give us a bit of a sort of a global insight, and then after that we will have managers and directors go through their respective activity areas. So over to you, James.
Good afternoon, actually. So yeah, we'll do what we just discussed with Nick. So I guess we're at this year, to the end of April, we spent 231 on CapEx. That's direct CapEx that we spend. It doesn't include land sales, vested assets or third-party projects. We are about $70 million ahead of where we were this time last year, which is about 43% improvement. And we're tracking pretty close to where we should be by the end of the year. We'll be about 20 million behind, which represents about 90% of capital expenditure.
We're getting there. That's it. Sorry about that.
In terms of some kind of key market updates, so recently we've had the central government budget announcement and the Reserve Bank OCR announcement. Both of those are probably going to keep inflation elevated for slightly longer. The central government announcement, the central government announcement of 71 billion hasn't really changed in the last budget announcement. There's only a slight proportion of new or additional funding in that, so it's just maintaining the status quo effectively of infrastructure requirements. Another kind of central thing to how we deliver projects here and most across the country is NZS 3910 is our form of contract, our preferred form of contract. That's been out for consultation and review. This is the biggest one that's been done since 1987, I think is the last time it went out for a significant review. Fundamentally, there's been some minor changes and we'll be submitting a response to that by the end of June. The other item is we undertake a capital delivery maturity assessment every year. When we did our initial assessment, we were at level 1 out of 5. This is effectively our capability of how we deliver projects. We undertook the assessment in March, and we're effectively at level 2, which is slightly reactive and it's probably on par with most other local councils. So if there's any questions on that, otherwise I'll pass on to Mike, who'll do the civic stuff.
Cheers, James. Good afternoon. I'll go through the key highlights of the civic development. So the Dive Crescent car park is coming towards the end of the install, and we're looking to be completely out of there by the end of July. The developed designs and the cost estimates will be coming through in a report. Will be coming through in a report to the council later on in June. The railway underpass, that was probably the highlight of the last quarter. We got that installed over the Easter weekend, and including the wing walls. and we now have the site secured, so we don't have public access through onto the existing boardwalk. We've now completed the 100% developed design for 90 Devonport Road, and we're now moving into detailed design and into there's a lot of close coordination between our team and the base build team to ensure that the project is delivered with the minimum of disruption. And then finally for this month, we've now commenced the construction works on Elizabeth Street East and the Tunks Reserve project. So these are just a couple of highlights of the underpass work. We completed that install in 50 hours. We were given 50 hours by KiwiRail to undertake the works. We had to change the methodology from what we originally planned for the original works in January, which we unfortunately had to defer because of the adverse weather conditions. And then just a couple of shots from the 90 Devonport Road project. We had a site blessing, and we had and you'll see there's a timber model of the building, the third photograph from the right, and you'll start seeing. So we've now completed all the pile foundation, 130 piles are in, and they've now commenced. They've probably now 3/4 way through on the ring beam installation. We understand that the timber framing will start being delivered the end of July, so you'll start seeing the building rising out from behind the hoardings. These are the budgets at the moment. We are running slightly behind at the moment, but we have a high confidence in the year and the forecast due to the number of Te Manawataki, Te Papa projects in the developed and the detailed design. And if I could just say, the developed design for the library community hub, that initial package was delivered last Friday, and there will be the interiors package delivered by the 16th of June. We also looking at potentially carrying forward the cost or the budget for the Beacon Wharf. We're just finalising that design, but we anticipate that project will catch up and we will have that completed by summer 2023. Beginning of summer 2023, Chair. This just shows a status of our projects. So you'll see the only ones that we've got an amber light on is the Spring Street car park, and we've had a number of complexities there, in particular with the drilling and the reinforcing, but we now have an end date, which is the end of September this year. So that will bring to a conclusion the Elizabeth Street and the Spring Street car park strengthening works, and as I said earlier, the Civic Administration building, we're now into the detailed design process. Risks and opportunities, these are, I think, common across the whole organisation, so increased cost to the escalation of materials. However, we've got an intense early contractor involvement process across all of our projects, and we work with our contractors in just working through the final detailed design to ensure that we are getting the best value for money. Again, potential slippage in time frames across all the projects, and that could be anything from weather related to consenting, but again we are working closely with our contractors, and just a bit of caution around the amount of work that is happening in the Tauranga area, and the potential effect of that on the delivery of the program, but certainly again our main contractors, LT McGuinness, they're certainly working closely with our local contractor market. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mike? No? No? Let off quite lightly there, Mike.
Thank you. Place this way.
Right. So a bit of an update on the good work we've been doing in Spaces and Places over the last quarter. So up there we've just got some of pictures of our highlights. So we've started physical work on the Marine Parade Coastal Path. We've a new toilet block which has gone into Waterford Park in Papamoa. The second stage of the sculptural piece that's to go in around the summit as part of Moa placemaking, ready for Matariki, just down the bottom, so that's all ready to go. Our second stage of our Pies Park Connections project, so you can see there's a brand new footpath through the Drainage Reserve and Shane Road that's just been installed, and the sculpture, the Pikarangi sculpture, which has gone in as part of the Gordon Carmichael Reserve Walkway Connection project. So that was pretty cool to see that go up last week. So lots of cool stuff happening. Yeah, it's neat, eh? I've got to make them look a little bit more exciting than just an Exiloo. So as I mentioned before, some of our highlights, 540 metres of the Marine Parade Coastal Path has been installed. The team's pretty proud of that. The work has commenced on the Papamoa Coastal Pathway. If you've been down that part of town, you'll see all the earth movers in sight. So that's a link that connects Papamoa Domain with Taylor's Reserve. We've recently completed a number of renewal projects in the historic village as well. So that's included refurbishment of the incubator building, the schoolhouse, and most importantly the men's shed, which removes the issue with asbestos on that building. As I mentioned before, the work for the next Matariki celebration on Maao is well advanced, and that's part of the Maao placemaking project. That includes the installation of the final signage bundle, some stone sculptures, and at significant points of interest, the balance of the seating installation and the completion of the compass at the summit. Work on the Kokorerua Valley has seen the existing southern alignment section of the stream filled. We relocated over 1,200 native fish as part of that project and the infilling of the new stream. And with the completion of this season's earthworks, we're now moving into quite a large planting program this winter, and we have about 200,000 plants to go in. The Pies Park Connection project progressed with the installation of a connection from Te Otinga Place to Shane Road, and the walkway connection through Gordon Carmichael Reserve has been completed with that installation of the Pikarangi at Gordon Carmichael Road entrance. And work is well advanced on the installation of a new skate park facility at Gordon Spratt Reserve as well. So it's been a very busy quarter for the team. So what that means in terms of budget, we're tracking reasonably well in terms of our overall budget and have reasonable confidence in the forecast. Just bearing in mind that these do include some projects that are running over multiple financial years, so going into financial year 24. In terms of some of our top projects and how they're tracking, Omanawa Falls, we've had the new scope and budget approved for that. Work is well advanced on the car park and also the track work, and we're looking to have that completed and open by the end of the year. Marine Parade Coastal Path, as I said, good work has been made on that first section. We've got to keep an eye on the cost on that one, as we've had some increases in the material costs that we're working through with the contractor at the moment. The upgrade to Sportsfield network, we had a little bit of a delay with the lighting coming into New Zealand for some of the winter lighting to go in around some of the sports fields, but they've now arrived and been installed. Some of the weather over the summer period wasn't actually, ironically, there you could season for growing sports field grass. So some of that work's been deferred to the next summer season. The Marine Precinct offloading wharf, we're getting QSs done on that one at the moment, and we've just got to work through some material cost escalations on that one to see how that stacks up. And the Kopererua Valley project is tracking very well. In terms of some of our key risks, like I said, probably the one you've heard me mention the most, inflation and cost escalation, and that's mainly around materials. So we're just regularly reviewing our scopes and seeing what we can do around that. We've still got some cross-council project dependencies, so we're just making sure we're meeting with those teams regularly to make sure programming is aligning. And as you heard previously, it's just the continuing constrained market that we have locally. So we use our panel a lot for engagement, and that certainly helps with early contractor engagement and getting the contractors on board. So any questions?
Thanks, Amanda. I did see the towed upper, the end of the waka down on Gordon Carmichael on the weekend, so great to see that being installed and the footpath coming to completion.
Yep.
And we did have some of the residents from
Bethlehem Country Club.
Bethlehem last week and make mention of it, so great to see those connections in.
Yep.
I did have a question about the K Valley, Kopererua. So with the trans relocation of species, once that's completed, will that just rejuvenate naturally, or will we be looking at putting native species back in there?
You mean the fish species?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it would just rejuvenate naturally. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Also on the valley with the planting of 200,000 plants, my understanding we've still got Hapu and Rotary involved in that?
Yes, so it's a combination of volunteer groups and
Right.
contractors planting. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a great project.
Yeah.
Bill?
On the same theme as in terms of the valley, the final stage of the realignment, Amanda, when's that programmed for and to be completed by?
So at the start of the next, it'll be dependent very much on how early we can get into the site as part of the summer earthwork season. So it'll be, I think they're aiming at kind of September at the moment. So the northern alignment's been formed. The next stage is to release the bunds as part of that alignment, and then do the same process with backfilling the existing stream and then livening the complete alignment. So that's all scheduled to happen during this coming summer earthwork season, starting in kind of September, and then there'll be a final planting season winter next year.
Further question, in terms of some of the land adjacent to, and I'm thinking of the southern stage which has been completed, there's land between that alignment, the stream alignment, and Takatimu Drive. Is all that been left to regenerate naturally? Because obviously there is planting around the vicinity of the construction works, but is the rest of the land left to look after itself, so to speak, in terms of regeneration?
So there'll be a mixture. So there's quite a lot of planting planned to go on that kind of outer area as part of the riparian planting for the stream. In terms of the surrounding wetland areas kind of beyond that towards the power site, they're being left to naturally regenerate.
Sorry, Stephen, you've got a question?
Just going back a couple of slides to your forecast capital program. So your current forecast is to be 75% of your projects by the end of the year. I'm just wanting to get a feel for your level of confidence to ramp that up. Thinking about our long-term plan program going forward and the capacity internally and externally to be able to deliver to budget.
So with the capital project team in Spaces and Places, this time last year we only had myself and one other project manager. We've now got 16 staff, 2 full project delivery teams in full flight. So we're well set up to comfortably deliver between $40 to $50 million of CapEx per annum.
Just going back to the sports fields, so in order to get that different grass, we had to use that chemical, which we had to go through a process. Do we have to repeat that process? The fact that we're doing it over 2 years, or was it time limited? Just couldn't remember.
So that was specific for the couch grass that went into Lynx Ave and the maintenance of that. So that was just specific to that site. The rest of the sites were just using a ryegrass sports field mix.
Right, but wasn't there a weed suppressant? Then we had to have the noxious.
Yeah, but so Lynx Ave was
Oh, it was
done.
only
So
for
Lynx
Lynx
Ave was done,
Okay.
and that site was done. There was just a couple of the other sports field sites that they couldn't get the earthworks completed to a point where they could sow
Right.
the grass with the weather we had over summer.
I didn't realise that whole discussion that we had was only over Lynx Ave.
Yeah.
It sounded like it was all our sports grounds. Okay. All right. No other questions? Thank you. Thanks very much. Great work. Just quietly working away. The Waters team.
So, no pretty pictures, unfortunately. Lots of words, but most of our stuff's below ground, so can't quite match some of those photos up there. However, I've got a good story to tell. So, obviously, our renewals program is forecasting on track and things are going well. And you would have seen, obviously, the amount of rain we've had in the last 4 months. Our stormwater system's coping pretty well out there despite that, so it's been really good. One of our key projects, Opal Drive, is well underway. For people who live out that way, you would have seen a large timber walkway going and a pipe mounted off the side that's just about finished now, so it looks really, really great. And the pump station is well underway. It's quite a significant project in the next few years. Te Maunga wastewater treatment plant is one that's sort of hidden away, but it's the bioreactor is quite an important project for us. We had reported previously around foundation issues. There's something like 3,000 odd piles that have to be put in first before you can actually get the foundations out of the ground. They finally found a suitable methodology and solution, and I think the commissioners are going out there for a visit this month, so you'll get to see a little bit about that and the conditions, but things are working well at the moment, so it's pleasing to see. The other one we thought we'd talk about is the Te Maunga Marine Outfall. So we had one of our staff was out on a boat, and the outfall was about 1 kilometre offshore. And we've got a remote operating vehicle. It's a large that's been designed partly in-house, but with some specialists in town to actually, 2 divers take it down and put the pipe through the pipe, and you can take camera pictures. But it's also been designed to remove objects out of the pipe. And so it's retrieved large pieces of concrete pipe from where the pipe first went in on the joints. So it's helping us as part of our investigation for the long-term future of the outfall in terms of reconsenting. Yeah, Wally, is there anything you want to add on that? Because you've got a lot more experience in that. Got it covered?
That's fine. We think that we should bring a presentation, at least to the exec, but possibly to the Commissioner as well, because it is a fascinating story, and I'm sure you'd enjoy it. So that's something to look forward to. Like a rat up a drain pipe. We've got pictures for in abundance. Screening processes are fascinating. You always know what's going on within the community when you look at the screenings. you know, when the Smurfs were out and all of that, you had the whole collection.
The last one, I know that Harrison Cut has been finished, but this project got quite a bit of status. We had a stormwater conference in Auckland, so we had staff members presented up this paper. It was well received, but also made an international article in one of the papers, or sort of reports, monthly reports that comes out, ICE, and so I thought that was really neat to see. It's the first apparently for Tauranga, so yeah, great outcome.
What was it that caught the interest of those people?
I think part of it was the surprise around the environment. So if you remember rightly, before we started that project, it looked at the drain, it was quite bad. But in fact, within that drain, there was plenty of fish life, as we found, and there was a significant number of species of fish that were taken out, relocated for us to do the work. And even after the work has been completed, remember we only did construction on one side of the bank. The true right-hand side of the bank remained with its vegetation. Those fish and eels have all returned back there again now. So that to us was a key thing. That's what we presented at the conference, and I think that's what got a lot of questions afterwards around, you know, you go in and physically do some works to the environment and thinking the environment was in a bad state, but actually, while it looked visually bad, it was actually quite good underneath. So it makes you think about every project you do out there. So,
skinks and caterpillars.
Yes, yes, very much so. So from a program point of view, we're on track. The one thing I would point out is renewals. So last time round we were 112%. We did quite a bit of investigation in the last sort of month and a half, looking between the operations team and capital team, and we've re-evaluated that again. So that's dropped that figure down. That's why it's 23%. But generally overall, the program's on track. No real surprises. In terms of the projects, the desludging is on track and going well. The contractors sort of gone on to 2-shift roster, 16 hours a day, to reduce the volumes out of that. It seems to be tracking reasonably well, so we're relatively happy there. Te Maunga, the bioreactors, obviously the piling works has increased the costs of that project, and I mentioned there's something like 3,000 piles. They've probably done about a third of the piles at the moment, but yeah, things are operating okay. It's not a swimming pool out there, which is you'll be grateful when you go out there now. The methodology originally had a hole dug and then the piles we'll be putting afterwards. Now they've levelled everything off and putting the piles at ground level, and that stopped from having to have a swimming pool in place while the contractor was working out there. The third clarifier, which sits alongside, has been accelerated in terms of design. There will be some issues which are more around the dewatering side of the operation. We're only allowed to dewater a certain volume of water out on a daily basis, so we're going to have a period where the bioreactor is being built and the clarifier is going to start, which is going to limit a few things. But other than that, costs have gone up in that, and we've made note of that through this process. Opal Drive, I talked about before, was going really well from an Eastern Coral wastewater perspective, and even our water stage 1 and 1A, which is more around the lakes area extensions, has gone really well too. So that's completed as of this month. In terms of risks, I think the biggest risk for us was around ground improvements, and you know, that risk I'm leaving there for the time being. We'll be in a better position in the next 6 weeks to understand how that's gone. Likewise, our project mix, we talked about a lot of smaller size projects rather than the big ones. The opportunity, which I've highlighted at the bottom here, is really quite amazing. We were looking to put these procurement panels together for both construction and for professional services. We are still spending quite a few hours at the moment doing this. We were overwhelmed with the number of sort of people that actually put a proposal together. So we had 14 construction companies. We actually had 64 design organisations. That was narrowed down to 32. So we've got a staff of 5 of us working our way through these processes, but we're going to get some really good proposals out from what we've seen, and this is looking at those 9 outcomes. So yeah, we can see that as being a great tool to assist us in terms of capital spend going forwards. And of course the last one, which is everybody's around cost escalations and trying to make sure that we are getting value for our ratepayers out there in terms of our projects. I think that's us. Any questions?
Can you flick back to your one on with the desludging? Yeah,
Desludging?
desludging. Yeah, thanks, Colin. So the 30 March, that's when the consent goes to?
Yeah.
So you're noting in terms of accelerating the efforts to remove sludge, but after that date, will there be some still to remove, and then what happens with that?
So that's a very good question, the one that we've been debating about internally, and it's one of those, how long is a piece of string? The problem with trying to assess how much sludge is in a pond becomes very hard to try. You can do a number of surveys, but in essence, we're confident we're going to get the majority. Yes, there may be some left. The problem for us is that taking it out, we're not allowed to apply it after with this resource scheme when it runs out to land, which means it's got to be transported to a recognised landfill, or you've got to have some other means of taking that sludge somewhere else. Now, as a biosolid, it can be used for vermicomposting, and Wally's operation team are doing that at the moment. So we are reviewing things as they get closer to that date, and we'll bring more of an update back to you as we get closer there.
Thank you for the presentation. Just in terms of Harrison Cut, when prior to the work starting, was there any ecological surveys done? And then post that, is there an ongoing kind of monitoring program?
So in answer to your first question, yes, there was, and Wally jokingly said there we had to do a number of surveys out there of the ecological, whether we could find any skinks, and cat. Yeah. So, at the time, the results were very, weren't very encouraging. It's only over a period of time, especially when we put the fish sort of framework out there to catch all the fish in and out, that we actually got this initial data of what actually lived in there. So it was a mixture. I mean, that's why I say it's a lesson well learned for us. In terms of monitoring after, yes, we're keeping a very watchful eye. And as I said, we've already done one check to see what the life is back in there, and it's flourishing. So for us, that's quite important, given the work that we've done on the left-hand side of the bank. But what it goes to show is that the right-hand side of the bank, even though the grass provides a shelter and from the sun, but it provides a living environment under there. So it means we've got the ecology right, I believe. And so, yes, just keeping monitoring is going to be a key for it.
I think it'll be useful to, we're actually meeting with the Papamoa Ratepayers Association, I think it's next, is it this week? Yeah.
We can give you
So it would be useful for us to be able to outlay, because I know some of them were concerned about the work that was going on, and then through into the Wairakei.
We'll give you the paper, because the PowerPoint has a list of all the ecological fish and eels that we found, and there's a massive list. Yeah.
Yeah. And the good part is it does show connectivity between the waterway and the ocean. So yeah, there's a real blend of species in there. So it's a much healthier waterway than we even appreciated. Yeah.
I think we could share the article in the ICE magazine as well, which really highlights the project.
But it still also acts as a great reserve area for the families. So you've maintained that as well. So everyone's benefited. Okay, thank you. Transport.
I'll just quickly run through transport. I don't, again, have as many interesting pictures, but lots of words. So I think the good news for transport is we're sitting about triple last year's budget, so in terms of delivery, so that's a great step up from the team. In terms of highlights, the key things are we've done a couple of jobs outside of schools, so these are the ones that have quite a large impact for the community affected. So Kennedy Road pedestrian crossing and 13th Ave at St Mary's School. We've put in place a low cost, low risk construction panel So the idea behind that is that will allow us to go to market a lot quicker for some of those smaller jobs, the under $2 million projects. In terms of accessible streets for the Otomato Peninsula, we're looking to go to consultation on that in June. And then Cameron Road Stage 2, we've recently completed the community engagement on the shortlisting. So 449 people involved in the feedback. And we're looking to have the business case report actually to council hopefully before end of year. So we're likely to come and ask council for approval to proceed subject to Waka Kotahi funding, because it has to go to the Waka Kotahi board, but we'll ask for approval in principle hopefully this calendar year. In terms of other projects, Papamoa East Interchange, so the stage 1 forecast is completion in July, so that's effectively the next stage of Te Okara Drive, so that's almost finished, just the last tidying up that we're doing now. We've just awarded stage 2, so that is the final stage of Te Okara Drive and the Sands intersection. And stage 3, which is the new bridge, is actually out for tender at the moment, so with an idea that we get underway on that in December. In terms of stage 3 Monganui Road, if you've been down there recently, you would have seen the new planting, which finishes that off and it makes it look a lot tidier. And then we're just about due to start consultation on stage 4, which is the final section still to be done. The timing of that work is tied in with the skate park and with places and spaces. In terms of the Tota Street improvements, the new signalised crossing at Hewlett's Hull is obviously operative, and that's now working with a significant increase in pedestrian and cycle volumes along that corridor. In terms of the numbers, this is the really boring slide, but the good news is we are looking to deliver on a budget of about 140 million this year. So that's a slight decrease on where we were tracking last time. You'll see there a significant increase in the construction program. So that is tracking really well. In terms of low cost, low risk, the issues that have been affecting us in there are particularly weather. So unfortunately, because we're at the surface, not below the surface, we are heavily weather dependent on the ability to get projects completed. In terms of the investment program, there's just been delays with the Cameron Road Stage 2, Area B and the Arataki business cases, so that's why that's dropped back by the 17%. But if you balance it overall, we're actually tracking pretty well. I'll go through these pretty quick. In terms of our top 5 projects, Cameron Road Stage 1. So within transport, once we've had an increase, we leave it red. So if it goes red, it stays red. So even though that budget has been increased, it shows as red through here. We are hopefully on track for a completion by the end of this calendar year. In terms of Tauriko West, timing-wise, we're obviously just working our way through scenarios around consents, etc. Papamoa East interchange is all in the green, which is great, and I think tracking really well. The next key point for us is going to be when the tenders close for the bridge, just an understanding of what that likely cost is, given the cost inflation in the market at the moment. In terms of Monganui Road, those two show in red, and that's primarily because that project overall is delayed off the original program. But we are tracking to the revised program that we've got. And in terms of Area B, as I mentioned, we are hoping to go to consultation in June with the intent that we come back to council for a formal decision by the end of this calendar year, subject to funding from the Waka Kotahi board. In terms of our key risks and opportunities, primarily it's around cost escalation. We've seen 20 to 30% increases over the COVID period. We're not yet 100% sure what the cyclone impacts are going to be and how much resource is going to be diverted to those other areas. So it's just a bit of a watching brief. Market capacity is closely linked to that. It's still a very constrained market. And in terms of project funding, we're not sure where Waka Kotahi's NLTF will land. We're assuming at this stage that everything in the program is fully funded, and we will adjust the program obviously as needed as we go through. Any questions?
comprehensive. Okay, so I've got an echo. Stephen or Bruce? Okay. I love technology. Right. Okay. So thank you for that. Very comprehensive. Really good to see those teams ramping up with the delivery of the capital program. Really, really good to see. A lot of hard work's gone into that, but also gone into the building of the staff resourcing and capability. So thanks to all those who've been, there's a few smiles around the room. That's been hard work, but and I think, I don't know where Nick's disappeared to. Oh, it's gone out. Okay. But also what it's showing is those panels are starting to have a really good effect on that work continuity. And that's pleasing. So I need a motion to receive the update. Shad and Bill. Any discussion? Any other discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks very much to all those who presented. Okay, now I've just got a slight problem with my agenda. So we are now on financial monitoring 9.3. Yeah. Financial, third quarter financial, non-financial report to 31st of March, and we've got an update to that. Tracy and Jeremy, we're in your hands.
Good afternoon. I'll go first. Yes, we provided an update to the financial results just because the report was a little aged by the time it came to this meeting. So we just thought we'd provide you with the update to give you more of a sense of comfort, I suppose, of where we were at. The update isn't what I would call markedly different, as it turns out, from the quarter 3 results. A lot of the variance analysis is very similar. It's just a kind of an update of the numbers, really. So the total surplus year to date in April of $91 million is $17 million less than budget, and at year end that's forecast to be $30 million. $21 million of that relates to Tariko West, which we have discussed at this meeting in the past. Those impacts are now picked out in yellow on the attachment. The operating deficit forecast is to be $13 million higher than budget at $55 million. Tariko West contributes $5.2 million to that variance. We do have some forecast savings in operating costs of around $12 million. These have, however, been offset by an expected $11.6 million overspend in depreciation and a net $2.5 million overspend in debt servicing costs. So that is a really big number relating to depreciation. It does come from the transport revaluation last year, the extent of which wasn't budgeted. And also we've been doing a lot of quite significant capitalisation in the last few months. It's now starting to pick up. So this is a result effectively of a galloping capital program as well. Your revaluation impacts and your depreciation impacts will get steeper. User fees revenue continue below budget, now forecast to be $6.4 million under budget for the year. There's really nothing I can kind of add about CapEx. although the update from James was that we are now forecasting to deliver 90% of the program, which was a bit of an update even on my updated report, which is fantastic. That, I think, brings us to pretty much a record for the organisation. In terms of debt, gross debt at 30th of April was just over 900 million and net debt approaching 800 million. The forecast is for gross debt of 973 million, so just short of that $1 billion mark for the end of the financial year, which is 70 million more than budget. This has gone through borrowing resolutions earlier in the year. And that is about it from me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions on that? Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you, team, for the presentation. I found it interesting. One question I have, and it relates, I'm back on the main agenda rather than the supplementary, the late item, which was around operating revenue variance. And you mentioned that right at the end about a $6.4 million decrease. When our operating surplus is under stress, it strikes me that our attention to other revenue or the other levers of funding become really important. So I was wondering if you could expand on page, it's at paragraph 22 on page 52, about the delays in our consent processing, which is giving rise to ongoing discounting, particularly when it also says higher up that it looks like the volumes are going down. Not the biggest issue that we face, and it worries me that it's symptomatic that actually when we need to maximise our revenue, we are leaking money out the door. Now that's somewhat sensationalist. I don't quite mean it that way, but I hope the question is clear.
Yep, and I think it's the exact same question that I had a pink posted on, and Bill's got a pink posted on too. So
look at that! I'm looking down on top of you guys. I know exactly.
Yeah, quick off the mark. Sarah, we're all looking at you.
We have certainly been really conscious of that issue, particularly the discounting, which really coincides with timeframes dropping. Your discounting increases because the more days that we are over, the more we have to discount our applicant fees. It's something that we have been looking really hard at our options for improving at the last executive report and the previous Q3 report. When we talked to you about it, we've noted our staff numbers, which continue to be down. We're at 50% capacity of our planners at the moment and finding it really hard to get bites at job ads when we put them out. We have upped our reliance on our consultants, so despite the fact that consent numbers are dropping, we are still finding it very hard to get people on the ground to do the work. They are slightly improving, and I know that the numbers are at the end of Q3, and we are really confident by the end of Q4 that the discounts and timeframes will have improved, but they won't be at the levels of service that we had proposed through the annual plan.
Just to follow on, and I'm in the where there's the grouping of activities and what's on track, achieved and off track, etc. And there's commentary, Sarah, about the increasing complexity of our applications, and I would have thought that in terms of our resourcing would actually have regard to that type of issue, given the plan changes. It is a no doubt what has to be considered is probably increasing in complexity. So therefore I find that comment a wee bit puzzling in terms of then not being able to meet time frames given the resourcing over time and the reduction in volumes at the same time. So I'd just be interested in your comments on that matter. The
complexity issues, when you think about some of the significant consents that have come through outdoors recently. We don't have a lot of greenfield sites that we are consenting anymore. The areas where people are looking to develop are on land that has issues. And we might be getting, we've had a couple of recent consents where we might be getting 1,000 pages of application material and not necessarily good pre-application meetings. So right from the outset, that's hard to process within 20 working days. We want to process well. We want good consents with good conditions in them, and they're relying on waters and transport issues, which are also complex because, again, they're not greenfield sites. We are trying to prioritise taking those really complex consents to externals that have the capacity and the resources around them in some of the agencies that can support us to do those faster. But even those can be difficult when it's large developments on land with issues.
Comment on this matter, Chair. I presume that we have quite rigorous assessments at the beginning of the process, because you highlighted in terms of the quality of applications may not be what it should be. So I'm just assuming that some of those get battered back for the applicant or consultants to do a better job before they actually submit them for the consenting process.
We have struggled in the past to say no because we try to be helpful, and that is something that we have to work on.
So I don't quite understand the reasoning in that same box. So I'm looking at attachment 2, page 11, and it says the backlog of consents is effectively 0 and the volume of consents received is down compared with previous years. However, further down it says it appears that the consents which are going over time are predominantly older consents which were received when there was a significant backlog already. I don't see how there's still a backlog. There's still part of the backlog. Surely the backlog can't be 0 if we've got older consents which we're having to discount because we're not processing them on time. Surely that means it's a backlog.
Apologies for the confusion in that, and I was previously referring to our resource consent timeframes, not our building consent timeframes. And yes, they are still a backlog because we are working through them with the building consents. But you might recall this time last year when our timeframes were about 40%, not 70%. That backlog were consents that we hadn't even allocated, so even started work on. So we were allocating up to day 30 because of the backlogs. But for all consents that we have, building consents, not resource consents, this year we're looking at 90% timeframe delivery. So it's those ones that were part of that that backlog last year that are the ones that are becoming really hard to work through and affecting our timeframes. But we are meeting for our new consents 90% on time.
What's proposed then for those longer term ones?
We need to prioritise to get them out.
Yeah. And then if I look at warrant of fitness, we're not meeting our target, although we're closer than we have been for a long time. But I'm really worried then about food premises audits and the alcohol licensed premises where we're only really just over 50%.
And those are two areas where we have been working hard to get contractors in to do the backfill. We have had, again, resourcing challenges with a number of staff vacancies. You'll see with the alcohol levels of service KPI that we've gone from 50%, our average, which was the first 2 quarters, was only 50%, but we've brought that up to 100% this quarter, and that's been a focused effort on getting consultants in place to fill that backlog, and that's what we're doing with our food premises as well, making sure that we can rely on consultants and contractors to do the work where we're suffering some vacancy issues.
And is that the same for coastal encroachments? Because this is something we've had quite regularly, that we've set a target and we're nowhere near meeting that. So that's on page 14. Is that still under you?
That's spaces and places.
And places.
Yep.
So we just need, look, people forget. This is something we've just got to keep up. Otherwise, when we want to put a walkway or we want to put something, people have taken them over and forgotten that there's actually public space. It's really important. We might not need to take any action, but it's just reminding people that they are encroaching on a public place. They might be making it look nicer. Most of them are doing it for their own personal gain, and they are public spaces, and public areas need to be maintained as public areas. So whoever, I don't know who, is there anyone here from Spaces and Places?
Well, that might be one of those measures that we need to revisit through the long-term plan process, because maybe this measure was introduced when we had a specific program of coastal strip, and we were focusing, for example, along Marine Parade or the Mount Ocean View Parade. I know that there was a dedicated series of, if you like, programs that we were going through, whereas I think we need to understand what the program is here to see whether the measure's a valid one or not. I think we can report back to you on what the detail is behind that.
So without going into the history, the review of the measures for the LTP 2024 has put a line through this one because it's no longer as relevant as it used to be. So that's the intention at the moment.
That really worries me, because this is something we actually talked about this quite specifically. Not necessarily removal, but just making sure that people understood that they were encroaching on public land. And if you don't keep that up regularly, you get absolute howls of protest when you try to do something on public land. I would hate to see a line put through it, given all the coastal land that we have in Tauranga, because you are just buying a fight further down the track. So it might not be that you're asking people to remove stuff, but just a constant reminder that actually they are encroaching on public land, and at some stage there might be a walkway constructed or created on that public land. Otherwise you're just buying fights. You don't do it. We've had experience of that. Mr. CE?
Yeah, look, I think we need to come back with some more detail on this, and that can form part of the conversation around the LTP process. So, I mean, I imagine we had targeted areas that we were specifically focusing on. That whether we do that or not, I don't know.
There was in the past a targeted piece of work done at Papamawa, and yes, all these potential changes to the KPIs will come through this either council or through this committee. And we'll make it very clear what was in the old version, what was proposed in the new version, and if you want to change that, we'll change it. That's the process, absolutely.
What you had actually asked us in the policy work that we did on open spaces, and we were quite definite that we didn't want it changed.
So this is just whether it makes that top list of KPIs which hit the LTP, and there was direction provided a while ago to reduce the number from 100, which seemed to be far too many. We've done some work on that, which we can bring to you. It needs to go through our project steering group end of the week, I think, Friday, I think it is. And then we'll bring it back to this room, and you'll provide input.
That doesn't seem to me to be the right way round. If we've said to you this was important, that you then take it off the KPI list and then bring it back to us and say, is this okay? Because we've said that this was an area already that we that we wanted to keep a KPI and we wanted to keep activity.
Acknowledge that. We'll take that back to the team, the Spaces and Places team. We are the conduits for these conversations. We ask the teams what are the key measures for your activity or your group of activities for the LTP, and there's discussions around that. We'll take this conversation back there and say, you got it wrong, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Stephen.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work through what is the solution to this staffing issue. Is it why aren't we able to attract the right levels of staff? And then, or the alternative is, can we overcome the lump of the backlog of consents, particularly those complex ones, by contracting, and then get back on even keel? Yeah, what's the solution, I guess, is the core of my question.
I think the solution lies in both of those, and we need to use our consultants to help us manage, I'll use the word backlog, but it's not in the sense that we have reported, those consents that need to be shifted so that we can start on an even keel. I think there is also a lot to do in terms of staffing levels, and we've been working closely with Hamilton City Council, for instance, to see if we can share resources. They're in a very similar situation, and so we can't at the moment recruit principals and seniors, and they're in a similar situation. So we've been wondering whether the attraction of working across 2 city plans might bring people in professionally. We've reported at the last executive report that we've got a graduate program in place for our planners too. So 5 graduates were recruited in January, and they're doing a fantastic job. And we are hoping that once they move into intermediate roles, we can then bring on more graduates and potentially keep seeding that way. So I think it's a number of things. It's how we attract our seniors, how we get graduates through so that we can have always have the capacity in-house, but use consultants to get through this big hiccup.
It was a good question, Stephen, because we've been talking about this now for 2 years. I mean, the graduate program was one answer to that. Building consents, I thought we were looking at a bit more online. Is that still part of the thinking? That there was some using technology more, so a combination of all of that. And I guess the question then is, are we losing staff, and what is, if we are, what is our exit interviews telling us why we're losing staff?
In our building consents function, the turnover is quite low. In our resource consents function, that's been as high as 40% recently. There's been a wave of people doing their OEs that they couldn't do through COVID. So we lost 3 staff in April to overseas trips. So it's, yeah, the building consent team turnover is quite low, but the resource consent team is quite high, and it's certainly something that other councils are experiencing right around the country.
Just flicking quickly back to building warrant the fitnesses, and there's a commentary on attachment 2, page 11, about the full 12 months of checks and inspections have not been undertaken. The obligation for that, is that lie with the property owner, or is the obligation on those checks and inspections with TCC?
That's with the property owner, and they are obliged to do those checks and inspections, which we then audit after. We audit that annually.
I was just thinking, Chair, in terms of if it's not done, and then something happens with a building, what the potential liabilities that may accrue as a result of that gap in the warrant the fitness processing.
No, I don't, but I think obviously with the fire in Wellington, there's always a review after the event, and that review there highlighted the fact that council, was failing their ability to be able to do all the necessary checks. So it might be worth, I think it's timely that we just revisited our role and responsibility in fire inspection, warrant of fitnesses, and other building regulatory matters. So we'll do that and report back. The other thing I think it's worth, Sarah, you mentioning the fact that you talked about complex applications, and you talked about several thousand pages. The one you're referring to, probably that seemed to be most complex, was the enabling works at Toriko. We've reviewed that because essentially it was a difficult, long process, one that we received feedback from the applicant, and so as a result of that we undertook a review, and I'm not sure whether you like to just perhaps give a 2-minute summary of what we learnt.
The two consents that we have processed for the enabling works, one processed and one processing, were incredibly complex, and the timeframes were difficult, and there's a lot at stake for those projects. So we did get the process reviewed. Some of the key learnings for us has been in making sure that when we are allocating consents, we allocate it to staff who have the time and the space to deal only with those consents, and so we tend to allocate a lot of our complex consents to our seniors who have experience, but really the risk of the timeframes going over because that particular experienced staff member couldn't deal with both at the same time. We should have gone out to a consultant to run them in parallel and share learnings. Another key insight for us has been the need to pull a project team together. So rather than a planner here working with an agent's planner solely, and there's a lot of power for misinformation and miscommunication surrounding that relationship, is to pull together a project team that can work regularly, meet weekly, discuss where things are at, and make sure there's no surprises along the way. Really important for us, and one that we will do from here on in.
Yep.
Perhaps just one last thing too, and this is in relation to building consents. We're starting to obviously see some applications now for significant buildings in town, large multi-storey buildings, and it's not a skill set or an experience that many of our building inspectors or those actually doing building consents have. And again, I think we've got one senior qualified person that can do that in-house. We're trying to build that capability through putting people through programs. But of course, it's a very hungry market out there too, and people seem to get qualified and then move on to other things, unfortunately. It's just one of those ongoing battles.
I just want to be assured, Jeremy, that as those KPIs are reviewed in the top 25, that we're not dropping off some just because we don't meet them regularly.
No, that's not the.
They're too hard.
That's not the criteria.
I know that's not the criteria. I just want to make sure that it's not happening.
And the 100s and the 25 are possibly different things as well. So the LTP will have more than 25, and we've got 23, I think, mandatory ones from the DIA. So the 100 will come down. That was our intention, but that won't be the same as just the top 25, which is a different conversation.
Anything else on that quarterly report? And thank you for the update. I realise that the report would have gone to the cancelled meeting. Yeah. So that's helpful because it does give a brighter picture in some areas, apart from the accounting of Tauriko West, which was sort of, pardon my language, but buggered everything up. Or buggered quite a lot up. Yeah. Okay. from a reporting point of view, not from an operational point of view. Anything else? Okay, so what we need then is someone move that we receive the report to the 31st of March and I'm presuming the update, the accompanying update that was tabled today. Yeah, so the update to the 31st of April. Bill's moving and seconded by Shad. Thank you. Well, we'll let Stephen have a go, seeing he's get his name on the paper. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Okay, so we're on to 9.4, traffic and parking bylaw review issues. Yep, issues and options. Yeah, so you've got the same agenda as I've got, and it's all changed. It's now 9 point. Yep. Have you got the same one? You've got the 9.10. Here we are. I don't know why we got the earlier version, but it has not made things easy here. Okay, traffic and parking bylaw review issues and options paper. And you don't, neither one of you look like Nick.
Good afternoon, everybody. You've all met Vicky, and this is Vicky's piece of work. Yes, and we'll introduce it.
Okay.
Tēnā koutou. So yes, we're talking today about the traffic and parking bylaw, which is a bylaw that provides a regulatory framework for traffic and parking on council roads. It's due for its statutory review. In fact, it's a little overdue, but it's still in force until October 2024, so we're just going through the process. We had a quick look a couple of years ago before the statutory review to check if there were any major issues, but the feedback that we got was that it was working well, it provides an enabling framework, and then underneath that decisions are taken in particular roads and places supported by the bylaw. So it helps to support the parking strategy, and it also helps to support the community outcome Tauranga Ararau. And so in looking at the review, we found 3 places where we felt that we could better future-proof it for the next decade. So that's undertaking a bit of a refresh of some of the provisions where we've had legislative changes in the Land Transport Act and the rules under the Act, just to remove some redundant provisions that are now covered in land transport rules. We're suggesting to introduce a new registered parking option. So this would be an option that would help support the monitoring of time-limited parking. So you see it used in other councils potentially as part of an incremental parking charge. So say first 2 hours free and then charging from then. So what this change to the bylaw would do would say that you need to register with the machine if that was put in place in an area. So at the moment we just have time-limited parking, which means that our officers have to go around and check and see, was the car there then? Was the car there then? Whereas what this would do would use the pay-by-plate system that we have set up, where people would need to register with the machine and then get the free parking for whatever period was decided in future. So we're not proposing this for any particular place at the moment, but we just think it's a good addition to the bylaw and gives you more options in future should you want to move to a different parking strategy or option in future. So we're suggesting adding that into the bylaw just to give you a bit more option in future. And then we're also suggesting that we clarify the council's position on secondary vehicle crossings. So again, this is a bit of expectation management around the use of council land. So berms are council land, and in terms of when people would like to have additional vehicle crossings on their property, the transport team do a little bit of a check to make sure that it is actually offering a public benefit and it's not going to be to the detriment of the street environment.
However, that's no longer in any policy. It was rescinded in 2014, and because of that, the community are a little bit surprised by this at times. So we're suggesting putting it back in the bylaw so that it's really upfront and obvious for people that that's our position. As part of that, we looked into whether it was worth getting any vehicle crossing to have permission from council first. We looked through the vehicle crossings installations we've had in the past few years, and we were only getting around 10 to 12 incidents where vehicle crossings were installed incorrectly, and so we just didn't feel that the issues that were happening were worth the number of applications, because we do get a lot. So we're not recommending any changes to that. We also, as a follow-up from the use of council land work, looked into mobile shops and whether we could include them as part of the bylaw in order to issue infringement fines if they were operating in a way that caused a traffic disturbance. However, after seeking some legal advice, they advised that it would be a little bit difficult to defend. So on the balance of that, we decided that we would keep the mobile shop trading in the street use in public places bylaw as is, just to avoid any legal risk if we were to try that approach. So we're not recommending any changes on that one. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, and it's only really seeming once a year that we have any problems, so it was a bit of a sledgehammer to...
So 10 to 12 times, and it is one that they're actively working on education around, and so they proactively do go out, and it's just when you get new builders and contractors come in who maybe don't have that experience with berms, you get issues.
The we did have a query on the vehicle crossings where someone was trying to do it in a more sustainable way, so rather than making it all concrete, I think they were going to... from what I understood, they were trying to use grass or planting, and that didn't meet with the
Infrastructure Development
Code.
I can take that back to the Asset Services team to have a look at. So that's kind of more permeable options.
Something like that. If just have a look at that. So we're not... I mean, I agree with you that a secondary, because we don't want a whole concrete expanse where we might have some nice berms with some planting or that's sensible, but it would just be good to keep an eye on that more sustainable type of vehicle crossing. Anything else? Rohario.
Kia ora, thank you for your report. I have two kind of random questions, and it's about the parking meters. So I'm not sure how the pay by plate will work, because I think could there be potential for somebody to like park in a, say, metered parking space and then go, oops, I didn't see that machine and I walked to that one over there, which gave me free 2-hour parking. So I'm just that's one question. And the next one is really if we are going to introduce more parking meters, it would require a behavioural change from the community. So wondering if you've got some proactive comms that are ready to go out and not just on social media, because there are a lot of elderly people who live in Tauranga, and a few times I've seen them trying to use the machines and assist them with using them as well, and whether there would be people walking around going, do you need a hand? I'll show you how to do it. And the third question is around whether you considered the pay by space, which is what they have in Wellington, where you can use an app to pay for your parking there as well as a machine. Kia ora.
Thank you. So we did mention in the report, so I guess there's a difference between having it in the bylaw and actually rolling it out in an area. And I think any rollout in an area would need to be very carefully thought through so that people didn't get confused between a pay area and a registered parking area, and there'd obviously need to be a lot of comms investment in that sort of rollout. So we're not suggesting that we're using this straight away from when this bylaw's adopted. It's more just having a tool in our kiti to, if we want to use it in future. And as part of that, there would need to be a careful comms plan, and of course supporting people to understand the technology. And again, as I guess people get more used to the technology now,
potentially in future it might not be such an issue if we're talking that the bylaw spans a decade. You know, people may have adjusted to the parking machines by the point that it's implemented. But in terms of your pay by plate versus pay by space, because we already have a pay by plate system, this is just a tool that's thought to be appropriate with that. If a pay by space system was used instead, then potentially you'd need to reassess the bylaw. But I believe that it would be able to be kind of transferred to a space. You'd just be putting in your space rather than your plate.
And Rohario, we do have 2 people now in the CBD who are wandering around and will be, I assume, not only talking to businesses in town, but if they saw people who are having difficulty, because we know particularly some older people are having difficulty and don't have pay wave, that they would be offering some assistance as part of that. Correct. That's part of their job. Yeah. Shared.
Thank you. I'm pretty supportive of the recommendations that you've made and brought forward in your paper. I suppose I did have a question that was in relation to the registration or registered parking, and I understand your comments about the 2-hour free parking, and then beyond that you'll pay. I think in this context though, we've got a whole lot of time limited parking around the city, 2 hours or whatever, and support the point that actually there will need to be quite a robust education program around how you get people to register. You know, if you're not paying, you still need to register. So support the point that we do need quite a robust program around that as we roll out these parking changes over the next 12 months or so. And then probably just my other comment was around the mobile traders. I mean, we kind of know the problem areas around the city where that occurs, so whether it's Christmas trees or selling strawberries, and identify those areas, and we've already installed no parking behind the curb. I mean, that's probably another method we could use to deter that type of activity from a particular location that's unsafe, because I think that's what we're kind of trying to target, is those areas that are unsafe for people to access, particularly those pulling up and purchasing things.
Yeah, so the example that happened in 2021, the trader themselves were actually parked fine in terms of their operation. It was the customers pulling in, and obviously with Christmas trees you don't want to hoik it too far to your car, so people were making some bad decisions around where to park, and so it wasn't necessarily the trader themselves, and that's where the team kind of struggled a little bit, because it was that kind of customer demand that was causing the issue. So we had hoped to be able to maybe use the bylaw in this way, but yeah, the advice we've got is that it would be a little risky.
So the positioning of the trader then takes on quite a different perspective, doesn't it? To make sure that the trader is positioned in such a way, particularly with Christmas trees, where people are loading them into the back of the car and they don't want to drag them too far down the road because they're awkward things to carry, so that's easily, the trader is actually positioned where that's more manageable from a traffic perspective. And I just note, you are the policy analyst, not the actual person who is implementing the parking. So we do need to be conscious when we're talking to you. You will take that information back to those people who are implementing a parking policy. You're designing the policy.
We're giving them tools that they could consider to use. Yeah,
that's right. Yes. All right. So Bill's happy to move, and Rohario second. Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? I'll put that. Just check those two over there, because they're tiny little yellow hands that come up. Okay, so I'll put that then. All those in favour say aye, and you, on screen raise your hand. Thank you. Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. 9.5, growth and land use project process. Progress. Growth and land use projects progress report. Update.
Kia ora koutou. So yeah, I'm stepping in for Andy Mead today, and so got the team alongside me, and Christine will probably chip in as well, because it takes about 3 or 4 of us to cover Andy's knowledge. So we'll just give you some highlights and then open it up for questions. So yeah, plan change 33, just noting that I guess in terms of timing and just I guess the challenges around delivering that in the timeframes that were given, Janine and the team did apply to the Minister for the Environment I guess to look at those timeframes, and so now the hearings have been split into 2 parts. So with the first hearings to start on July 4th, and then a second round of hearings more on the substantive matters in October, and so that obviously pushes out the timeframes a little bit more, and Janine can talk to that a little bit or answer any questions on that shortly. Automaitai spatial plan, so it was great to see that adopted. And just really, I guess briefly on the Mount spatial plan and the Mount industrial planning study, they're making good headway. We've just had our design sprints for those, and we will be reporting back to committee on the 26th of June, so an update on engagement outcomes and also next steps around both of those projects. So I'm just going to pass it on to David now. He's going to give a bit of an update on the HBA.
Good afternoon, Chair. Ko David Fazakli toko inoa. So I've been engaged by Smart Growth to develop the HBA, and the HBA is a requirement under the National Policy Statement for Urban Development. So we reported the housing and business capacity findings to the Smart Growth Leadership Group on the 5th of April, and we're now obviously making those same findings available to this committee as well. So in short, a letter has gone to the Minister. It's gone to the Minister for the Environment and Minister for Housing, advising that there is a housing insufficiency as a result of the HBA. So the HBA is prepared as a lead-in and as a key input to the LTP, to the 2024 LTPs. That housing insufficiency, as you note in the report, we currently have an existing housing shortfall which will steadily get worse over time. In terms of planning and making sure we've got sufficient land coming on to cater for new housing, that insufficiency will actually improve in the longer term. So while we've got a shortfall over the initial 6 years up to about 2028, from then onwards things do improve. When you apply the competitive margins that are required, however, we still have a housing shortfall of about 1,000 houses in that longer term period. As well as the housing side of things, we also looked at the business side of things as well, and engaged with the business community around some of those requirements. So again, there is an insufficiency around industrial land in particular, around that employment land. Again, as we move into the medium to longer term, we know that we don't have sufficient supply. So the vacant land that may exist within the existing zoned areas around the city, the small 100 hectares that's due to come on stream with Tauriko Business Estate, subject to a private plan change, won't simply be enough to cater for future business requirements. It's a little bit different with commercial and retail. That largely tends to take care of itself as new areas are opened up, new growth areas. But overall, there'll be about 320 hectares of additional industrial land that will be required, and so from that, at the moment, there's a project being undertaken as part of the Smart Growth work, looking at where future locations may be for business land, and it's fair to say that those locations are in the Western Bay of Plenty district, and we are looking at further work to identify which areas may be more suitable, and engaging further with Tangata Whenua and other stakeholders around that.
Probably before I pass it on to Christine, just to note the Smart Growth Strategy 2023 is underway, and certainly as part of that strategy is to identify I guess the future growth areas that will help to make up the shortfall of that housing and also industrial land. So I'll just pass it over to Christine.
I'll just cover the other key highlights, and Alistair, if you've got some specific questions, probably can help me on Western Corridor. So Western Corridor, the notification timeframe for this rezoning of that area for Tauriko West is now looking more like September. We're doing it as a variation to Plan Change 33. There's a couple of pieces of key work still underway in terms of putting together or meeting all the requirements of our funding arrangement that we have with IAF to secure the $80 million. It has a timeline of the end of this month, so there will be a further report and confidential because it relates to those commercial arrangements to you this month. And then the other matter in terms of the Western Corridor is work is underway in terms of the procurement processes for the enabling works, and further work is underway in terms of the long-term transport business case for State Highway 29, and there'll be a joint 3 councils plus smart growth meeting on the 27th of this month to seek endorsement and approval of the business case to go to the Wakatahi board for their August board meeting, so a key milestone in that project. The report provides some highlights out of the development trends report, so that's a report that we do together with Western Bay. It fulfills some of the reporting requirements under the NPSUD, and Ave is here and his team have done a lot of work on this, so we thought it was a good opportunity to just publicly record that this document is now there. It provides quite a lot of trend data and is a really useful resource document, so these specific questions he can cover those. So that's probably the highlights. There's a lot of detail in the actual attachment, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chair. David, I'm just going back to the HBA, and I'm on page 101 of the agenda, where it talks about also the medium-term commercial and retail and shortage and the long-term. I take it from the heading, though, that sufficiency or otherwise is only on vacant land, because in terms of commercial and retail land or buildings, there are a heap in this city, all around, whether it's Cameron Road, CBD or other parts of the city that are actually vacant. So I'm just wondering how that supposed deficiency gets assessed, and whether it's just on the need for vacant land to provide for that.
Through you, Chair, so it does assess both the existing vacant or land that's available but not being used, and the redevelopment opportunity for retail and commercial as well as industrial. So it has factored in the amount of, I guess, vacant land required, and then how much of that already may exist within existing zoned areas. So that's the work that Market Economics did as part of the business capacity assessment. That report, the housing report and the summary are all available on the Smart Growth website, and I think we're probably going to provide some links through to those from the Tauranga City website as well, which sets out that methodology.
Is that methodology based on a particular way of modelling, or is there some more direct assessment in terms of what's vacant?
So largely it's a desktop exercise in terms of current levels of, I guess, vacant commercial and retail, and then how those might project forward in future, done by the Market Economics economic model, which is specifically, I guess, prepared for Tauranga City and Western Bay.
While we're on methodology, I struggle to work out the short and medium term, which seems quite minor on housing shortage, given the growth projections and the amount of land that we know is available. It just seems so light.
They certainly are, I guess, relatively small numbers, Madam Chair. So overall, over the next 30 years, out to 2052, Tauranga City is going to need between another 30 and 34,000 new houses. So those numbers in terms of how much have we planned for, identified for, versus demand, is quite a small difference. So what we're saying is actually we've done a really good job identifying where those new growth areas will be. It's a case of being able to implement and fund the necessary infrastructure to deliver on those. I guess the one unknown is how much intensification we will get within existing urban areas. And so there have been some assumptions made around those numbers.
Intensification is playing quite a big role in that. Yeah, I was worried about that because just looking, we get approximately 3,000 new people coming in each year. Looking at the growth figures, so it's up and down. But you know, you think of where those houses are going, and the land that's available. So it is intensification that's actually
Mix of
biting
intensification
into
and greenfields, and sort of broader infill, if you like, but it doesn't. It assumes that all of the required infrastructure to enable that is put in place. So yeah.
Even going into
Yeah, yep,
infrastructure, I'm
yep.
just looking at the short-term shortage anticipated at 1,400 and the medium-term at 1,600, and thinking of what land we think is either is ready or available or is going to be available in there in those time frames. Yeah, I think it's very optimistic. Very optimistic. Okay, any other questions for them? Yep, Te Pio.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Kia ora, team. Well, my part is pretty simple, really. You know, we have significant Māori communities across Tauranga City, and we have a significant shortfall in terms of addressing their needs outside of the PDAs. And so, you know, I think, you know, if we're going to put stuff on record around where we are with housing, and those numbers might look small, do you have a view on what is required for assisting Māori communities with their housing needs?
Kia ora te pio. So the process that our team, we're working quite closely with the Takawanga Te Pau team in terms of how do we support multiply owned Māori land to develop. So what we've been doing is working with all the Māori land trusts and identifying what their aspirations are, and then depending what that is, we've been doing a number of studies with them to look at what is the current zoning of the land, what does that enable, and whether that's fit for purpose. Where it is fit for purpose, we look at, well, what are the other barriers to enabling development in that location. Quite often it's the capacity for infrastructure, well, there's no infrastructure in that area, so I'm aware that we're working with the infrastructure team about how we can enable that, and also just supporting those Māori land trusts from a capability and capacity to be able to progress that. So the Takawanga team have a role to support that, and we support that from a planning perspective. Then where there's I suppose a limitation within the city plan, or whether that might be the barrier to enabling Papakāinga, we are working with those relevant hapu or Māori land trusts in terms of how we progress that, and that's very much being supported from council, but led from the hapu or the Māori land trust about what their aspiration is, because it really needs to come from them, and from there we will progress plan changes. So a good example of that is Ngāti Hangaro. So Ngāti Hangaro have at the moment a limit, which is on the number of Papakāinga housing, and that is limiting development in that area. So we're working really closely with them to identify what changes are required for us then to progress a plan change. So it really depends on the Māori Land Trust or the hapu and where they're at, what their aspirations are, and what is the barrier to develop, because for each land trust we find, or hapu, we find it as something slightly different.
Kapa, that's awesome. We've got a meeting with, or an opportunity to put forward that case with the Minister in July. So it would be good to pool our resources in terms of, because one of those big barriers is the infrastructure funding required for those land trusts and for those communities. And so we've done some initial work with that and have been working with the Takawainga and Tāne around what some of those figures would be. I suppose my point is that it's just a space that's missed in the HBA. It's a number that's missing out of the report going forward. Yet we raise it at Smart Growth. We raise it with the report writers in terms of the HBA, and it's been raised around our TCC committee meetings consistently. I suppose it's just seems to be missing the mark in terms of where does it fit, because it seems to me when we ask the question, around, well, what does it look like? How many houses are we looking for? We can tell you that for short term it's 1,400, and for medium term it's going to be what those numbers that are in here. But we're unable to identify or put a number or a figure around what that looks like for our Māori communities. Yet we're doing a hell of a lot of work with them. I mean, we're coming up with some indicative figures that we're looking to put into the Tangata Whenua Spatial Plan. I'm just saying that for us collectively sitting around this table for Tauranga City Council, I think we just need to, like we were talking about before with the previous reports, we're making progress around improving these KPIs. I just think that it's about time that we address the issue around this table.
So I'll come to Wayne, but in the discussion with Minister Woods last week, I raised exactly this, and I understand that there is, and probably you're leading it to Pio, and it would be good to see it reflected in here, so that so these are the trusts and hapu who are working on it. This is what can be the short term, achieved in the short term, because they're reasonably simple obstacles to their development. These are the medium term, and then these are the long term, with some figures around them. And I understood from DIA and HUD that they were working with the Tangata Whenua Spatial Plan, and they saw it coming as part of that. And I think it would be helpful if we were then able to pick up some of that and include it in this report, so that it's visible, so that we have because I have no idea how many they're working with.
Yeah, we're definitely, so we did give an indication in the SLG reports earlier around that framework, and then putting the numbers together, were one that we had to go back to exactly the same as the TCC team are, getting confirmation from those trusts that they were happy for us to release those numbers. And so we've given some indicative numbers which are now somewhat out of date, but we're definitely working that by the time we come to present to the Minister, that we've got a better picture around what the Western Bay, both TCC and Western Bay, are looking to initiate the infrastructure for the first year 1 to 3, and then those that can are looking to progress it in that year 4 to 10, and then those longer situations, which are the 11 to 30, using the same time frames as we're assessing all of our major housing projects across the city, to address that issue. That not while we were talking about housing, we are actually talking around that community development and cohesion and resilience. That those projects that are even in the 4 to 10 and 11 and above have a lot of social issues that need to be addressed at the same time they're trying to address their their housing situations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it was nothing more but to tie talk with the conversation thus far and give it some context. It was interesting. You led out by saying, going through the exercise, looking at whenua, working with Trust Hapu and iwi, and then seeing whether that whenua was sort of fit for purpose for Papakainga. I mean, this has been a long time project. We were trying to do this decades ago, and I know a lot of good work's been done, but that's the point, I think, and everyone's made it. There's not one clear sort of report or data process that you can push a button and see what that quantum and number is. Because me personally, I think we'll be surprised at how little that number is. It's not the silver bullet that might be able to come and rescue the city in terms of numbers, and so it'll be wonderful to see that data finally in a report that we can get a reality check, because I'm sure that's not going to be the answer to alleviating a lot of the problems the city's experiencing in that housing space. But sounds great. I don't know when and how this report or a number of reports will drop, but it'd be great. I'd love to see that sort of data and see what those numbers look like. Kia ora.
Thank you. I do quite enjoy flicking through the report because it brings everything together, so you can kind of see everything all in one spot. So yeah, thank you for pulling that together in the table. When I first started reading through the report, I thought, actually a Gantt chart would be really good, but no, I think we'll leave the table. I just had a couple of comments in relation to the future development, the HBA, and thinking through. Now, we're aware that Western Bay also have a shortfall, and given the constraints on us and on Western Bay in terms of providing zone land for future development, and it just kind of makes me think, in terms of what we're trying to do as a city, I suppose the question that pops in my head is, how aligned are we? We've got smart growth and we're trying to join the dots together. Aware of what Western Bay are doing out at Paengaroa through to Kāinga. We've got no visibility over that, and we're not necessarily linked or joined in necessarily from a governance perspective. But then also thinking more broadly, looking across into the Waikato, into Rotorua. People having to travel further, buy houses regionally now to work in Tauranga. And I suppose the question for me, and it's probably to all of us, is really how joined up are we when we've got this growing problem, not just for us, but for our wider sub-region, and whether it's for Māori, but then stretching out, and those indirect impacts that this problem has on the region, and then also that inter-regional connection. I'm not sure if you guys can answer it, but we do what we can in terms of the areas of influence that we have, which is TCC, and try and connect in and align with what Western Bay are doing in particular. But in the back of my mind, it just kind of makes me think, how joined up and how aligned are we really?
So I'll make a couple of comments. I think a lot of that conversation will happen shortly in smart growth. So the housing and business assessment is really a point in time assessment, and then projects forward based on current plans. That feeds into the revision of the smart growth strategy, which is going to be Smart Growth 2023, which the Smart Growth Leadership Group will be looking at, and that's exactly where you have that conversation about what's your collective view on the growth response to what the housing business land assessment is saying. So it's saying there's a gap in quantity, and there's a timing issue here. The Smart Growth strategy will be your response to how that's going to be dealt with, and it will include the work that's been done to date on the iwi spatial plan. So the next couple of Smart Growth meetings will be really important, and then that goes out for consultation, and that sets the framework. So there is that political representation group that's been established. I think Bill is our TCC person, and that will be the core of the commencement of that political conversation, I suppose. So that won't resolve it all, but that will be where that discussion happens. And then, in terms of we'll probably focus more on the links to the Waikato than to Rotorua. And so the last Smart Growth Committee specifically passed a resolution about working with Waikato, particularly in terms of the transport linkages and sort of that, I can't remember the wording, but sort of that golden triangle linkage, and that conversation has started. And we're also working closely with the Waikato, but also with other growth councils on actually just how can you address all of these challenges and what might that look like. So there are a few things underway, but it is a big series of questions, I suppose, so it won't be resolved overnight.
Good. Chair, look, just reading through as well, we've got information here on the non-residential development capacity. So in the form of a question, then I give it some context, is Māori land taken into consideration in that data set and your modelling? Because in the space that I live, and I don't want to suck the oxygen out of the residential discussion, because it's vitally important, but again, in the space I live, Māori, especially in corporations, but trusts, talk about the commercial potential of their whenua. And so, they want to sort of get involved if they can, again, if it's fit for purpose of that type of activity. So in the data that's presented there, in terms of long-term, short-term and medium, is any of that information taken into consideration, development on Māori freehold land?
Through you, Madam Chair, not directly, no. The work that's being progressed as part of the Smart Growth Industrial Land Study is looking at potential areas that are multiple owned Māori land that may be suitable for future employment needs. And I guess that's the next phase of that work, is to have some of those conversations, because there are some trusts that may well be interested in those sort of commercial opportunities or lease opportunities. And we need to be in a position where I guess those further investigations can inform decisions on the smart growth strategy at the end of the year. And I know Martini has been part of the discussion that we had just the other week at the Combined Tangata Whenua Forum around the opportunities as well as the issues that business employment land creates for the whenua and for Māori, particularly tangata whenua.
Kia ora, thank you. And but again, I think most people know iwi especially aspirational in this space. Dreaming big, thinking big, so it sounds like it's a piece of work that'll drop out soon. You're on your way, so yeah, thank you.
back to order. And that brings us to the Wairoa River Valley Strategy Review. And that's Christine and Anne. Welcome, Anne.
Kia ora koutou. So it's been a little while since I have provided an update report, or we provide an update report on the Wairoa River Valley Strategy Review project. As you can see from it, the review isn't actively underway at the moment. We're proposing a phased approach, while some other elements are underway, largely led by the Regional Council. We were asked in the latter part of last year to provide a report to Tauranga Moana Advisory Group, that was in September, and then also a report to the Smart Growth Leadership Group. And the report that I've attached to my little cover report today provides that report, and it's from the combined councils, and just providing information about the review work and where it is, and the other related projects. And we have just brought through the approach that's been recommended and asking you to endorse that today. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora. Great for the report, thank you. And the actual review, smart growth review process, I think is thorough, comprehensive in here. But in a kōrero we some of us had just before this meeting, and I apologise if it's in there, is whether or not it's intended that a different entity or body or representative body will drop out of this process, because I see you're dealing with one or two entities now, or have done in the past. So I don't know if it's clear in here. Is there an intention to have another body created to have input into the report from a mana whenua, tangata whenua point of view?
Thank you. We, at the time, we were advised who the representatives were from the Wairoa River Hapu, and we've noted these in the Smart Growth Leadership Report. Similar to Te Kawaerupu, a couple of different Hapu representatives, and that would be the group largely that we would engage with scoping a review when it's needed.
In actual fact, that that's where I was angling actually, because there's been a little bit of movement out there in terms of the Wairoa Hapu group and representation. How do I put it? There's more defining as to who the Hapu grouping is, and then there a rejuggling of representative body or persons for those respective Hapu. So it might be worth just cross-checking and double-checking if it's outdated. If it is a year or two in terms of that representative base, it is certainly, my advice is might be worth asking that question again.
And we're always guided by what tangata whenua view is on who should be, involved. So very much happy to have those further conversations.
Yes, I mean, I have got those highlighted, so I'm just reading the wording again. So not support connections, no, that's not what I was, again, you could be supporting outdated connections. In early 2006, with our Hapu partner, so maybe not goes for, again, it's not just support, it actively seeking the advice of the hapu out there as to who those representatives are, because what you've got on there and supporting might be outdated.
If I can just clarify that, so item 3 is in relation to regional council-led work around the freshwater management, leading to the regional plan change. Freshwater.
That's the point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, mandating is the most important thing when it comes to this. So you just, so with due respect, I hear what you're saying, but if we can maybe front foot that and signal that to regional as well, if that's not happening, it may be. But this is an opportunity for me to say something.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper that I've put together was a snapshot of where we are at currently as a very young EM team, but also an EOC. We have had some significant weather events in the last while, but nowhere near as severe or as impactful as other parts of the country. So when I was looking to see how do we best evidence where we're at the moment, the starting point for me was to look through the legislation as well as what has been set in place by the Joint Committee in terms of being able to evidence that we're meeting all of those requirements. So that was the approach to the paper in terms of satisfying that we're doing what we need to be doing. Having said that, we have had some learnings from the recent weather events. They have been at a scale sufficient for us to activate the EOC and to test some of our processes and systems as well. This report was done prior to 9th of May. This report was done for the previous meeting, so it doesn't include the 9th of May. Having said that, the kind of ongoing learnings which we have post any event, which is to be expected, is things like ensuring the staff are familiar with the systems and processes we have in place. So we've realised that there's probably some work for us to do in that space. We have the systems, we have the processes, but given that the majority of the EOC staff, their substantive role is not EOC, that we probably need to make sure we're doing a bit more training more regularly with them. So my team, the career staff team, are working on an annual program which would support that. I'm just having a quick look. Yeah. Oh, the other thing is with regards to learnings from the debriefs, but also we've been fortunate to get access to the Auckland response review that Mark Bush had done, and my team and myself and the controllers also have made our way through that report as well and taken opportunity to learn from some of their learnings, that we're not having to learn some of those things hopefully ourselves, and we were fortunate enough to have Mark Bush here with us to pick his brain a little bit last week as well. So lots of ongoing learnings, and we are expecting some further learnings that will come out of the group review that is currently underway, more specifically the review into the response to Cyclone Gabriel, which we got off probably the lightest of the last 4 weather events with. So happy to take any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it's just in relation, look, it's on page 141, the physical page number. There's a piece there on community-led centres, and then following on that 54 is that it states that there's currently 5 marae that provide CLCs and potential for a further 5. I suppose my question is in sort of in the form of just wanting to receive comfort. How do I put it? Just, I'm hoping, and I'm sure there is sufficient DD on those marae as to what their capabilities are, depending on what the emergency event is, because we don't want to become a part of the problem should something happen, and everyone runs there, and we're we haven't got the resource or the efficiency to deal with it. So it's just really a question of comfort, and is there a DD process ongoing to make sure that should something come into play, those marae, respective marae, are in a good position to actually help rather than add to the problem.
Yeah, so probably just over 2 years back, we received some funding from the National Emergency Management Agency around resilience, and that was specifically for marae preparedness. So there was a program started probably about 2.5, almost 3 years back, and there were marae in differing places insofar as their readiness to jump on board that program. So there's 10 that we do work with, acknowledging that dependent on the nature of the event will be dependent on whether they stand up or not. So in this last weather event, Cyclone Gabriel, we had 4 marae that stood up. So that would be very much determined by the nature of the event, accessibility, etc., and what provisions we are requiring from those CLCs as well. Insofar as is it just accommodation or is it food, we are aware that there's some marae that are undergoing some renovations, and not all of that is accessible in each of those spaces. So there is certainly awareness of the level of capacity and capability, and my team works closely on an ongoing basis with the marae. We have invested some money into one of the marae, and about to the 4 that stood up for us, looking to see how we can enhance some aspects of their grounds or their facilities in order to make things easier moving forward as well, insofar as bringing people into those spaces.
Kia ora. My question is along the same lines as Wayne's question. So I know Wayne is talking at the end where the disaster has happened and you need to start emergency, like set up places and spaces and use marae, and hopefully they'll be prepared. One of my questions is really around before we get to that point, so it's around paragraph 3, emergency management, and you have their work in partnership with emergency services and other organisations. I would hope that iwi and potentially Hapu were part of those organisations that were engaged at that earlier stage around management. And then coming back to paragraphs 53 and 55 around the use of marae, it's whether the council's expectations and that Hapu's expectations around the use of their facility, whether we're on the same page, because when you open up the doors to a marae, you expect the people attending have an understanding of the tikanga and kawa of a marae, and I think some marae will open their doors, but it may only be for Māori because they understand the kawa. So I'm just, those are just a couple of questions that I have. Kia ora.
Thank you. So yeah, that's absolutely right. We have 5 marae that will stand up, and we have another 5 that may, under certain circumstances, stand up, and some of those it would be for their own people. So there is, with the community-led centres, those essentially, the decision is made to stand those up by that community themselves, not by us. We make decisions around civil defence centres and opening those doors, but a community-led centre is just that. It's led by community, and they will make the decision as to when and how they stand those up, and how they staff them, how they, volunteers that they bring in, etc. But obviously there is a lot of collaboration between us and those different CLCs that are out in community. So there is ongoing conversations. As I say, we have a program that is running. We're working really closely with the marae that are willing to stand up if and when needed to as well.
And sorry, in terms of my first question about management and working with, like partnering with iwi and Hapu at those earlier stages, is that currently happening?
So a lot of work is done through our Takawainga unit insofar as navigating that space as well as group level. So the advisor that I have that works in the marae preparedness space is in different spaces, both at group level as well as with the takas here within council, insofar as the more preparedness stuff and those kind of conversations, the educational pieces in terms of a focus on that preparedness and what is required of us in order to make those facilities available. Thank you.
Bruce, did you have your hand up? I've got a little notice on the board. I can't see the hand now.
Watch out for that sticky hand being raised. Paula, thank you for your report. For various reasons, I've been very interested in the Mike Bush report, and I'm glad that you have been looking at it. One of the things that interests me is our preparedness to react and act under pressure. And there's some quite revealing, as you will be well aware, discussion around how initial meetings were held. And I noticed in, paragraph 57, titled under research, you're looking at actually computer simulation of whether we're ready for tsunamis and all sort of drama. What are you able to do, and what assurance can you give us that sort of under the idea that practice makes perfect, that you've been able to internalise locally how to make decisions under pressure?
Thank you for that. Yeah, and that's. I was just going to say, how long is a piece of string? Because the reality is, anybody that stands up into those spaces, we don't know how they'll respond under pressure unless they're in that space. So we are a new EOC, as I've said. We are a new EM team as well. Most of our controllers are new. So it's a learn by doing at the moment. We can satisfy ourselves that we have what we need, and so far as meeting our obligations, what we're now having to focus on is just that, is the familiarity with those systems and processes. It's increasing our internal training insofar as people becoming conversant with what we have in place, but also a greater push to encourage our wider staffing more specifically to take opportunities to exercise more frequently, as well as take opportunities for deployment, because those are the arenas in which you're learning when you actually are on the ground. We have 2 exercises coming up, one next week on the 14th, which is a combined one which we will co-lead with Fire in New Zealand, Fire and Emergency New Zealand, with a simulated situation off the port, and then there's another one which we'll be playing with the other emergency services in July, mid to end July, again with regards to an incident out at sea. So we're going to be looking to increase those kind of simulations in the absence of the real thing, because I don't want to say we want the real thing to learn, and we don't want that to be our learning ground either, but there certainly is space for us to do more frequent simulations and more frequent training in our systems for our wider staff.
I think I agree that you don't ever want to have to put it into practice, but it's a question of how do you get yourself as ready as possible. So thank you for your answer.
Could I just add something? What we're also looking to do is for those, because obviously the hesitation for people that haven't really been in the situation when we're asking for deployments or to participate in exercises, there is some reluctance because they themselves realize that they are still very green in the space. So what we are encouraging is that we would send our experienced people, but send them as observers, that they have no responsibility in that space, but are purely there to observe and learn whilst given the opportunity to do so as well.
I've just got one thing. Thank you very much for the report, and I think it was good that you had the opportunity to talk through with Mike Bush, a pretty recent event which went horribly wrong, really. So I'm representing local government on the Gabriel Task Force under Sir Brian Roche. One of the things that's going to come through is this Lifeline Utilities. And because the one that's not there is power, so it's all very well getting food and water and transportation to people. But what we learned through Gabriel was when the power goes out, all the telecommunications goes out, and even if you've got batteries, they eventually run out and you can't recharge them. So looking to add in power into that, into those utilities, so you could get ahead of that by getting them round the table earlier rather than later, and perhaps also the telcos, because they were not on the priority list. They said going into Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay, they weren't on the priority list, so they couldn't even get in mobile telecommunication units. I think they call them COWs. I forget what it stands for. It's an acronym. So they weren't allowed to land. So getting the power and the telcos in those discussions early on, I think certainly we're promoting a change to the legislation.
Your point is noted, Chair.
Wayne.
I have got a question, but just to what you've just discussed, it's funny, it's back to the future. You know, I ran, you know, I gave risk advice in the Pacific for 17 years, and up there, of course, when the cyclones or whatever went through, as part of it, everyone had generators. It was part of the emergency package you had. Every big facility, every big business, and they had backup generators, and away you went to get around those. That powered up telecommunications, and in those developing third world countries, they're in some ways better equipped for these things because we've sort of rested a little bit, and now we're getting hit by these weather events that are out of character from past years. But yeah, it's funny, we could learn something from them now, I think, in terms of preparedness. It does, but it holds, and you can get the initial communication. Yeah, all those things. It's great planning. But now, what did I did have a question. Sorry. Look, and again, please, it's just comfort again. It's on page 141 again, but it's around the civil defence centres, and it's a bit like old Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. On paragraph 50 there, and it relates to Bay Park Stadium and Arena, and you've got Bay Venues Limited there. So it's just again comfort. I'm assuming they're sort of being incorporated into the bigger picture and coming to the fore if something happens. I'm assuming we're great communication with them, expectations, what's happening. They're built into this plan that whatever council builds, they're being kept up to step as well at the same time.
Yes, so we are signing off a memorandum of commitment with BVL, which will give us access to their 23 venues that they have. We did stand up Bay Park in Cyclone Gabriel. So we've had discussions, we've been in discussions since the end of last year with regards to making their facilities available to us, but more so their staff in terms of experience with customer facing, and there will be a suite of training which the staff will be put through that they can help man those spaces. So there will be a greater addition to this once our paperwork is signed with BVL, but they're certainly on board and they're very keen to be involved in supporting.
Sorry, I'll take it offline with Paula. It's okay.
Mount planning and delivery. Do I have to say all that again? Because I didn't turn my... Carl. All right.
Thank you. Yes, I think you recall at the last committee meeting there was a request that the report be delivered by the steering group rather than requiring Carl to have to report on the whole program. So I will just give a quick outline of the paper and we'll take any questions. You'll recall that the program has just been established to ensure we have a coordinated and aligned delivery of our Mount projects. The program hasn't been established to make decisions on those individual projects. They come up to the committee and to council when decisions need to be made, but it's about having that coordinated and aligned approach. The report gives you an update on the last about 10 weeks of work, particularly and quite excitingly we had the Mount Hub open on the 8th of May. And a lot of interest, and Carl's team had their design sprints for the Mount Spatial Plan there last week, which was really successful. When we last reported to the committee, Bruce, you asked for an A3 of the projects that the program captures, the 30 plus projects that come under the umbrella of the program. We tried really hard to fit that on an A3, but there are a lot of projects, and you'll see on that attachment A, a list of what's underway, where they fall under community and spaces and places work, transport, some of the natural hazards. We've got a really quick description of those projects and broken up the timeframes into when they're delivering what and at what time. What we haven't shown here and what's really important for the program is that a group, all the staff that are delivering these bits of work are meeting regularly to discuss where each project's at, where potential overlaps are, and in particular where we might be able to align our communications and engagement with the community, which is a really important part of the delivery of the program. Bruce, you had also asked for a list of the key risks that we are managing in the program, and that is included in the report. That first risk that we've got there, which is a lack of coordination between projects, which can particularly cause frustration to the community and disruption to individual projects, is one that we are actively managing. So we have made decisions around when some projects start, when they might be paused, when a good time might be to go out to the community with a kind of a single message. And this is particularly important with the work of the Mount Spatial Plan, which is that overarching 30-year blueprint for the Mount, and making sure we're not confusing people with other projects while that really important piece of work is underway. So we're hoping that we delivered what you were looking to see last time. That A3 is a lot of work and it's a lot of coordination across the organisation.
It's a very, very good report. Thank you very much. The only question I had was really, thank you for including the list of the stakeholders in the Mount Industrial Planning Study, and I had two questions actually. I just wondered whether we needed more industry there. They're not overly represented sitting around the table, although the bigger ones are there. And I wondered who the Smart Growth Development Sector group were.
Used to be a Smart Growth Development Forum. It was then effectively changed into a TCC. So it's not really Smart Growth anymore. So it's a what's the proper name of it? Development Group. Turn that off.
Through the chair, I can add to the first part, the question. In terms of the industrial, I guess,
business community. Priority 1 is also engaging directly with that community in relation to their Mount Industrial Blueprint, and we're working very closely with Priority 1 to understand, you know, the conversations they're having, the outcomes of their surveys and so forth. So there's a number of conduits, I guess, to that community, as well as through the Air Quality Working Party as well.
Look at the list who's sitting around the table. There's a whole lot of people who don't have businesses there. They have views about the businesses there, but they don't actually have businesses there. And I think we should be having more of those sitting around the table talking.
And going forward, we'll have a look at how we can get some better representation directly.
Thank you.
Not a question, Sarah, but just a suggestion in terms of this report and the attachments. I think it would be helpful if you arrange to send it to Graham Marshall, who's the independent chair of the Mount Air Quality. It would just provide some good context for him in undertaking that role. Yes, yeah, but I think it would just provide that connection back to the Air Quality Group. Well, I think the Air Quality, the Air Quality Group has. That's fine. It's just to make that connection and awareness in terms of that work.
I'm happy to move the resolution that we receive it, but given, Sarah, you've quite rightly recognised I asked for a change in the way of reporting. Can I just say thank you personally? This is in the form that I'd expect, and so well done, and I do appreciate it, recognising particularly the risk analysis. Thank you.
I'm happy to second. Chair.
Very quickly, Chair, and again, I don't want to be nitpicking because it's generous. It's included in paragraph 22 there about relationship partnership with tangata whenua. There's a key people below in a schedule, but in terms of businesses, the spatial plan and the reference group you are consulting with, representatives, Waka Kotahi Rana, Naitarangi has a number of businesses there, you know, and a lot of other things, you know, when you're talking, because, you know, they could raise matters that forewarn there could be some issues there, but they also do own a number of businesses there in terms of the spatial planning of the area. I don't know whether they should be included. That's paragraph 25. You've listed. Yeah, I say that I don't want to nitpick, but just as long as it's included there, who is the spatial plan includes a reference group comprising the following representatives. On 25, on page 146. So
I can provide a response. So the focus of the reference group is, I guess, does include mana whenua representation, and it includes broader representation of those parties that would likely help us deliver on the outcomes of the spatial plan. So investing Waka Kotahi and regional council and so forth. But certainly, I think to your point, we can look at, you know, that broader stakeholder group and engagement directly, you know, going forward. So, yeah.
All right, so it's moved and seconded. Anything else? All those in favour of receiving the report, say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. Okay. So that's been moved and seconded. I've put it, and it's passed. So now it is 4 o'clock. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting. We still have 2 items in open and then the public excluded. So it's not a particular time? Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll carry on then. Good. Don't have to stop at 4. So that brings us then to health and safety report. Is that right? Yes. Health and safety report. Alistair? No?
It's a tag team. Thanks, Darren.
Oh, it's Darren.
For coming in. This health and safety report's slightly out of date, as the excluded reports will be as well. Darren, do you want to take us through the highlights?
Or the lowlights. There's a lot of incidents.
Perhaps lights.
Kia ora everybody. So I take it, like Alistair said, it's this is sort of January to March data. Just a couple of points to talk to. The numbers have increased in regards to incidents, but I see that potentially as a good thing. I've shared over the last sort of couple of meetings that we've on a ISO 45001 standard journey, which is updating all our guidelines, our framework that our business partners are assisting, our project managers and different parts of the business. And part of that is we're increasing our interaction with different staff members. We've got a lot more support, so we've increased our staffing levels within the health and safety team. We've got a whole lot of training and guidance on how to do reporting. So albeit the reporting's increasing, I see that as our safety culture maturing. We are reporting more. Things that potentially might not have been reported in the past are now coming into our system, and we're providing a whole lot more framework and guidance on how to manage these incidents that are happening. So albeit we got an increase, that's because we're doing some positive work on changing our safety culture within the business. Where those increases have come, particularly again in the library space, and we have seen a slight increase in our parking and bylaws. On the back of that, what we've done now is we're working with our legal team. We've actually trespassed 6 members of the public over the last sort of 3-4 weeks on the back of this data. Poor behaviour in particularly the libraries, as I mentioned last report. We're really wrapping around the library space and the staff and supporting them, providing some wellbeing initiatives on how they can manage these individuals that are attending, particularly in the libraries. And we're working with the community liaison group, so the local community police are becoming highly involved. Our community liaison group within TCC is heavily involved in that support as well. So I think we're managing that really well now. We're wrapping around that those staff. Another area of concern was the LPR car. So you would have seen that we've put some sort of, I guess, corrective actions in place to support that LPR car to avoid some of the poor behaviour that they were facing. So we've tinted the windows. We've got a lot more support on resilience training, conflict management. They're getting that support now. So again, they're reporting now as well. So that's why the increase in sort of incidents has gone up, because they know what above the line behaviour is and what below the line behaviour is. So they're actually reporting things that potentially they would have just, let slide. So I see that as another good thing. Another thing of importance is on the back of that increase of development of tools, etc., we've seen a whole lot of more interaction with our health and safety team. We're upwards of 500 increased contact points in that quarter, and that's through different parts of the business reaching out to the health and safety team for support. We're increasing our support with the senior leaders through a due diligence perspective, which has seen their due diligence visits go up as well, which you would have seen in the reporting. Another point I just want to raise, that we do have an open investigation with WorkSafe. Okay, so we've provided all the information through that was required through that investigation. We've closed off our internal investigation and implemented a few corrective actions on the back of that. We're waiting on next steps and information from WorkSafe as well, how that next stage of investigation is. Next point, just around the drug and alcohol policy, so that's part of our audit review as well. We're in the final stages of getting the drug and alcohol policies and procedures up to what we're calling our clearinghouse, which is the final stage before it goes to the exec for review, which I see as a really good, overdue policy and procedures to be at that final stage. So we're well supported by the risk team. And finally, just on our wellbeing, we're still trending really well against our OCP, our national average for OCP, which is really, really good. And what we've done, just to add a little bit more tools to our kete, we've added the wellbeing element to our health and safety working groups or our committees. So they've got a really strong wellbeing focus, just not health and safety. It's actually adding a wellbeing flavour to it as well, which I see as another cool initiative. That's me.
Great report, thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Shad.
Just in terms of the LPR car and the incidents that have occurred around the vehicle, is the car, is it identifiable, and does it need to be identifiable to the public?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's probably a Sarah question, to be fair. It is identifiable. It's got TCC branding, and it's a pretty unique looking car, to be fair. It's got cameras on the top of it, so you see it every half an hour, and you see, it's well identifiable. But I guess the changes with a slight tint was more designed around safety and a well-being element for the staff that are actually driving it being recognised. So yeah, I mean, you can't miss it.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Anne, Darren. But just to cut what on, by the way, and I totally agree with you, Anne. It's a very informative report, and could I just shout out the ELT that have gone out around those doing their work, and it's good to see that report coming in. Just a couple of questions from you, mate. One is, can you give me any background of the notifiable incident, and is it actually cleared with WorkSafe? In other words, we have dealt with it and there's no further investigation required. And secondly, in the left-hand box on page 154 of the agenda, quite rightly note the relationship management for PCBUs. And I was looking at the notes, which seemed to be more about what we were doing internally. What can you give me that we're doing with our combined PCBU sites and understanding our risks? Because there's a few court cases coming out which show that we might be surprised what our PCBUs are. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So first question in regards to when you're talking notifiable, I'm assuming the LBI incident you're talking?
Well, perhaps I've missed it, but I noticed the one point there that there was one notifiable event. Yeah.
Yeah. So the notifiable event in that quarter, it was the LBI incident that happened on New Year's Eve, and yeah, that's still an open investigation with WorkSafe. So we've provided all the information that they've requested, and we're just waiting for further information or whether they're proceeding. Yeah, so that's the Bouncy Castle incident that happened on New Year's Eve. Yeah. And,
right.
Yeah, and in regards to your second question in regards to the PCBU relationship, so that's a big part of our ISO 45001 journey, is working out how our contractor management standards and expectations on all our external contractors are being managed against our risk framework, and basically being able to provide our project managers and our engineers to contract, engineers reps on clear guidance, clear framework, and how we review and monitor the work that they're doing for us. So ensuring that our risk portfolio doesn't cross over to their risk portfolio. So we've got a clear guidance on who's managing the risk and whose expectation is who's responsible for each risk part of it. I guess that would Would that answer that question?
Look, all I was concerned about was I get the internal need, and that's really superb. Are we doing anything particular or specific with combined PCBU sites that is managing the current risk, let alone improving our systems and procedures?
Yeah, I think what we need to make sure is that we've got a clear understanding on whose risk it is. So if it's a contractor that's doing work for us, it's their risk, and our responsibility is to review and monitor that piece. We don't tell them how to manage the risk that they've, I guess, contracted to do. We ensure that we've got that review and monitor piece. So that's clear in WorkSafe's legislation and guidance that we, as a principal, they're doing the work for us. We review that they're doing the work that they've signed up for. And we are providing clear expectations on our contractor management standard.
Brilliant, thank you.
So that's moved by Bruce and seconded by Rohario. All in favour say aye. Against, carried. You want to go, do you?
Oh, I do have another meeting.
All right.
I can wait till the...
Right.
Kia ora tātou.
Yes, just let me find it in my agenda, because for you
I was
it's
most concerned that
9.10.
you were worried about it. But here I am.
And here it is.
Yeah.
For Bill and I,
Thank
it's
you all.
9.2.
Filled my heart.
Everyone else, it's 9.10. Lagoivas.
So pretty hard to compete with health and safety around incidents. So I'll just take it as read. Obviously, of note, we had a 33% increase in the last quarter, and that's tracking again this quarter. Nothing that kind of jumps out, although I do think it's generally down to the amount of projects that we've got going on. So there's a lot of interest in the community around some of the background to those projects and how they kind of came to be, who made those decisions. So a general community interest in the amount of work that's going on. I also think we're a lot being, from my observation, been a lot more proactive comms about projects. Our websites are starting to fill up, you know, with the project pages, and people are reading them, so then they like to ask us questions. So, you know, well, that's what we're here for. So I think there's nothing really specific. There's obviously a group who has been asking a lot of us, official information requests, and that's our taxpayers union, and they it's all publicly available. They write a report every year, so they do multiple requests of us, and generally our poor old finance team and our HR teams generally suffer around just because of the sheer volume, so it's more work for them around. They'll ask all kinds of things, staff numbers, staff working overseas, redundancies, bonuses, that type of thing. And then all our financials, you know, how much does it cost to run the commission office and how many staff. And so they're general questions, but there are a lot of them, and we're getting a lot within weeks as well. You know, 1 week we had 5 from them in 1 week. So it started to abate now because they'll be preparing their annual report. I'm not sure where they publish. Well, it will be published on their website, of course. The other note that I'd make is that national elections come in, so we have researchers and officers in Wellington generally who like to ask a few questions of us about what's happening in Tauranga. Generally the same kind of thing. You know, potholes, that's popped up. So it just means that, you know, often in front of the media is getting more active as well. So we've had more requests from the media than we've had before. So it looks like we're going to keep on this trajectory of increase. So far it's manageable, but it does put pressure on the organisation, and particularly our infrastructure, building and compliance teams
you know, who do end up generally at the end of these questions often. So, any questions?
Thanks, Kath. It's interesting that the New Zealand Taxpayers Union, who complains so much about the costs that councils incur, are contributing quite largely to some of those costs and imposts on staff. But that's life, isn't it? Any other questions for Kath? Bill?
Kath, the report notes there have been no complaints received from the Ombudsman or the Privacy Commissioner. What does that look like on an annual basis? Are there many, or is that level very, very low?
To be honest, we don't actually get that many. We're very efficient, good at what we do. And I mean the whole organisation, not me, because we're only able to put out that information. And I would also say that we're very open and transparent. There are very few times when we're not providing information, and we're obviously careful when it's private information, but generally, if it's written down somewhere in council and someone asks for it, it goes.
Yeah, the team do a really good job. But that's the way it should be. It's public money we're spending, so therefore it's public accountability. All right, Bill, it's moving. Seconder. Rohario. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against. Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, now would someone like to move that for the reasons outlined on the agenda, we move into public excluded? Wayne, thank you. Bill, second. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Against. Carried. Better say. Do it properly.
We could adjourn the